From the Evening Standard in London, I'm David Marsland, and this is The Leader. Someone in the UK right now has a new form of COVID-19 that scientists think could set back our roadmap out of lockdown, and we have no idea who they are or where they are.
The third case is an individual who didn't fill in the test card contact details. So what we're asking people to do is if they've had a test on the 12th or the 13th of February and haven't had a result yet, to get in touch with, in England, 119.
Vaccines Minister Nadhim Zahawi was on national telly, like this interview on BBC Breakfast, appealing for whoever it is to hand themselves in. Boris Johnson's insisting there's nothing to worry about.
First of all, we have no reason not to think that our vaccines are effective against these variants of concern at the present time. So, people should take that as some as some evidence of confidence, and then also listen to what Public Health England are also saying. They don't think that there is a threat to the wider public, but obviously we're continuing to do everything we can to stop variants coming in at our borders. That's why we've got a tough regime.
But that's not what scientists, including the government's own SAGE advisor, Professor Graham Medley, think. He says there's always a risk we might have to go backwards in our roadmap out of lockdown. Our political reporter Sophia Sleigh is here. Sophia, how did this happen?
That seems like a very, very simple question, but I cannot give you a simple answer, I'm afraid. I suppose what you can say is that we're in a bit of a cat and a mouse game with a new variant, this time from Brazil, and that the government is literally trying to track down a carrier that they don't know who they are, where they are, and they've basically made a very, very public appeal to try and track down this person. Essentially, what they've done is this individual has filled in their registration form when they got their COVID-19 test, but it's not got their name and details on it, so they can't contact this person. So there's this crazy sort of scramble to try and track down this person. They don't know who, what, where. They know roughly when, so there's something there. It's someone who took the test on or around February the 12th or 13th and obviously didn't get their result back. So that's where we are at the moment, and the government's put out this very, very public appeal for people to call, 119 if that was them, if they think that could be them.
But I mean, it really is quite something when the vaccines minister has to go on national television to appeal to somebody to come forward, isn't it?
Yeah, it is quite extraordinary. And it is a shame, really, because I do think, credit where credit's due. I think the government's done a really good job on the vaccines programme. It was, a huge scale operation, a mega operation. And on the whole, I think it'd be fair to say it has been a success story. But, the criticism comes in, particularly, Labour pointing out, why on earth wasn't the hotel quarantine in place by that point already? They'd announced it and everything, been talking about it, but why wasn't it in place by that point? And we knew, there was the risk of these variants. They'd stopped flights from Brazil and South Africa because obviously we had the problem with the South African variant. And I suppose it is... the poor minister was, basically admitting on his media round this morning that the government has no idea who this person is, where they live, whether they even travelled to Brazil or not, whether they're, being good at home and self-isolating, or, potentially they, could be on the bus going to work and they could be asymptomatic and have no idea that they've had it.
So clearly embarrassing, Sophia, but does it matter? The Prime Minister says that our vaccines can be adapted anyway.
It does matter because scientists are basically saying, this could set us back on our route map out of lockdown. And there was a couple of scientists this morning, and one in particular he's one of the government advisors, said we might have to go backwards in terms of our route map, because the fear is basically that this variant could be more resistant to vaccines than other variants. So that's kind of what we're looking at the moment.
So apart from ministers doing TV appeals, what else is happening to try and trace this person?
They're trying to trace the person down through sort of postal records and things like that. I understand that they're also trying to speak to sort of local authorities on their systems to try and track down the person. But yeah, it sounds like, this is just the public appeal is just one part of them urgently trying to track down who this person is and where they might be.
There's more on this on our website at standard.co.uk. Now, Oprah Winfrey's been teasing her big interview with Harry and Meghan.
Were you silent or were you silenced? I just want to make it clear to everybody, there is no subject that's off limits.
That's one of two 30-second clips for the CBS special that's running in the US on Sunday. Interestingly, Meghan doesn't say anything in either of them. Our royal editor Robert Jobson's here. Robert, is that because she's not said anything interesting, or does she have an awful lot that they're keeping under wraps just now?
Oh no, I think this is all part of an orchestrated PR sales technique that CBS are using, Oprah's using. You know, Harry's already spoken to James Corden. He's done his jovial act and, you know, slightly jokey stuff. Then he's looked more serious in these pre-clips, these promotion clips. They're saving the big one for Meghan. I mean, she's the star in America. Harry's just the sideshow. She's the American princess. And, you know, every time Oprah said, you know, silent or silence, you know, it was like a Hollywood movie. They did a close-up on her face and she had all the emotion. So really, I think they're just trying to build up that the main stuff's the main shocking stuff, as Oprah has told us, is going to be coming from Meghan herself. But you're going to have to wait for the main event for that.
They have said, Harry and Meghan have said that they don't want to upset the Queen. But is Buckingham Palace worried about what might come out of this?
It's a bit late to start saying you don't want to upset the Queen. I mean, this has clearly upset the apple cart in every way possible. I mean, you don't have Oprah Winfrey saying this is a no-holds-barred interview, saying that nothing is off limits, and they're not going to be difficult questions. I mean, the fact there's going to be references to the late Diana, Princess of Wales, it's not going to be 90 minutes of having a go at the media, because that would be exceptionally boring. Harry's been doing that for years, and you know, the message is there to be shot at. Only in this case, in my opinion, I think that both Harry and Meghan were given a voice and a platform on which they spoke very loudly and spoke on a wide range of subjects whilst they were working roles. But, you know, clearly if Oprah Winfrey is calling this shocking, then there's going to be some revelations that are going to upset the royal family. I think even just generally saying that the way that Harry's spoken about his mother already, reference her into the whole thing, and the way that, you know, she felt so alone, and that's why she had to leave the royal family. At least he had his wife, and that they could share the problem. You know, it's another sort of, you know, coming so soon after the crown where Prince Charles got a hammering. It's another sort of attack on Prince Charles. I mean, at the end of the day, Prince Charles has done his best since Harry lost his mum, and he's raised him as well as he could, and he's financed him and done everything. So it's a little bit unfair on the Prince of Wales to start now, you know, having a go at him in this way, I think.
So what's the PR strategy for Harry and Meghan then? I mean, is it going to be some kind of scorched earth thing where they totally separate themselves entirely from the royal family and they never speak to William again and they upset the Queen and they're just going to go off on that route?
Well, they don't seem to have a policy, because ultimately, you know, if you were them, you wouldn't put all your eggs in one basket. In the first, you know, few weeks of being months of being in California, you know, you've done a James Corden interview, you've done an Oprah Winfrey interview. I suppose there's all talk about them doing a sort of documentary as well about themselves. There comes a point when you're going to get a little bit of Harry and Meghan overkill, particularly as they're talking about their private lives incessantly whilst complaining about not having a private life. So, and in America, everything, isn't it, is about your profile. And of course, they're doing their best to build up their profile in America, where actually Harry's not as well known as one would think. Meghan, you know, wants to build up the profile too, because the bigger the profile, the bigger the paycheck, and the bigger the exposure for their foundation in which they want to use to do good. So my personal belief is they've gone out there to try to boost their own popularity, their own exposure, their own brand, and they don't really care too much what that's doing to the royal brand, of which, you know, is seen by comparison as quite staid and matter of fact. I mean, the Queen has spent all her life dedicated to service and duty, is an intrinsic part of the British political system, and this in a way is sort of cheapening that whole business of what the monarchy and what the royal family are all about, which is a shame, I think. As for the timing of it, it's not great, because of course it's all happening whilst the Duke of Edinburgh, who, like the Queen, has served all his adult life as somebody who's a devoted public servant, is not very well in hospital and has actually just been moved hospitals today. So, look, I think that maybe in the years to come, they may look back at the way they've handled this and realise, as Princess Diana did, that it's not always the best way to go out so loudly, and it's best to sometimes leave doors open.
That news about Prince Philip came through just before we started speaking, Robert. So obviously this is all kind of breaking news. We don't really know what's happening at the moment, but there seems to be a bit of a brave face being put on the Prince being in hospital. Are they worried at Buckingham Palace? Are people concerned about Prince Philip over this, or is he expected to be out of hospital maybe next week?
Well, we hope that he leaves hospital at the end of the week. We really do hope that happens, but he's now been in hospital longer than any other spell that he spent in hospital. His age, his great age, is only several weeks off being a 100, doesn't help. They're trying to keep things quite straightforward at the palace. The tone is certainly less upbeat than it has been. I mean, when we started, we were talking about this being him being treated with an abundance of caution. But this one, is definitely, there's a different tone to it in what is being said and what is being implied. He's being moved hospitals, and although he's comfortable and responding to treatment, he's expected to stay in hospital until at least the end of the week. But the thing that is important is being transferred to St Bartholomew's Hospital, where the doctors will continue to treat an infection, which we said in the Evening Standard it was an infection, but also to keep an observation on his pre-existing heart condition. Well, this is now getting more specific in what they're saying, and I think that we've all we hope for the best and wish him well, because clearly he's not very well at the moment.
And that's the leader. Join us again tomorrow at 4 p.m.